we're talking about why self-harming behavior is a problem. Um, and it's basically because it comes with a lot of costs and a high risk for mental for health hazards and infections, and it loses the effectiveness um, of coping with emotions very fast. And today, I would like to focus on how to address the matter once you encounter it, and how to engage with people who show self-harming behavior. Um, Even though I'm pretty sure that all of you do a great job and are very capable of what you are doing, I think it's really important to leave counseling to mental health professionals on the one hand, because this is counseling is something that's not done like in 1 or 2 hours. This is a bigger process, and also because it's a lot of responsibility that you might not want to take. And also, of course, if somebody is showing severe mental health problems, it might be more important to take them to a psychiatric hospital or guide them towards other kinds of counseling. Still, once you encounter mental health problems or self-harming behavior, you can still, of course, talk to people and engage with them, and hopefully support them to show less self-harming behavior or even quit it. And another very important guideline for this is to engage without pressuring people. Being calm in the situation, don't make somebody tell you what they did or why they did it. Leave the decision on the pace, on how the conversation is going, to the person you're talking to. Also, be guided by the best interest for the concern of the person. So, of course, yesterday when we talked about reasons why self-harming behavior occurs, hopefully we learned that it's somehow helpful on the short run, and this might be something that you argue about with the person, that they say, well, but if you say this is something you should stop, and they will be like, but it's helpful, or this is the only thing that I can do, and you could stop the conversation there, of course, but if you guide it by the best interest for the concerned person, it's also about other health issues on the long run, like infections and so on. And showing this while engaging is also helping to build a connection to the person, to open up, for example. The same goes with once you engage with the person, to respect the person's needs, for example, for confidentiality, or sometimes if somebody opens up about something that is really stressful or connected to feelings of guilt or shame, it's also important to have moments of silence, because sometimes things feel like super rushed for that person. And even if you're sitting there for 20 minutes or half an hour and you don't talk much, maybe their thoughts are racing, and so the need for silence or for breaks is much bigger than in a normal conversation. If you argue about self-harming behavior, that this is something that's bad, like we said yesterday, why is it a problem? And there are some valid points that we talked about yesterday. It's about opposing the problem, not the person. So it's super important to see that to admit to the struggles that the person is encountering, and to the problems that are caused by whatever they are, whatever situation they are in, and not about that they did something wrong, for example. And another thing is, and this talking about opposing the problem with the person. Sometimes if you have a certain relationship to somebody and they show self-harming behavior, for example, this can make you angry or sad. And sometimes, let's say, you want to take that person and shake them, and just tell them that this is not okay. This might be a feeling that occurs, but it's not about what the person is doing, what the person did, or the behavior of the behavior is the problem, not the person. And this is important to separate these things from each other. Also, by engaging to show somebody that you have compassion for their problem and for them as a human being, and then opposed to the problem that they are showing self-harming behavior, even though they might think it's functional or helpful. Sometimes perceiving that somebody is showing self-harming behavior might be overwhelming or confusing or even repulsive, and that's also okay. This goes together with the point I made before. It's about the problem and not about the person. So you're not necessarily repulsed by the person themselves, or you're not confused by the person or overwhelmed by the person. You're overwhelmed by the behavior they are showing, and this is okay because you're a human being, and like I wrote, not a humanitarian aid machine. So, and this is something from my experience, mental health professionals and also volunteers on the field sometimes not necessarily forget, but we get the feeling that once we are in a position where we want to support people or help people, that we need to do more than a normal person needs to do. And suddenly we have much higher expectations towards ourselves regarding our stress tolerance, or regarding our tolerance towards things that are intolerable. And this is a reminder for all of us and all of you to remember that this is having emotions and being overwhelmed, being confused, or being even repulsed by something is a human reaction, and it's okay to have this. And we will talk later about how to deal with this. Are there any questions so far to this? I hope if anybody opens their mic that I can hear it now. Any questions so far? Okay. When you engage with a person who shows self-harming behavior, or when you address self-harming behavior, it's important to provide validation regarding the hardship they are enduring. So even if you're in a different position, even if you're in a more privileged position that most of us are, you can still show understanding for the circumstances, the thoughts, and the emotions that led up to self-harming behavior, for example, but also to a difficult situation. And for most people, it's super important to see that somebody else who's maybe not in that position, understanding or saying that this is a shitty situation, or this is that this is a hard situation they are in. And addressing that matter is super important for people to feel understood, or to feel safe to open up about difficult things. Mm, and the next point is maybe the hardest, from my experience. It's super important to be direct and thorough. And this is a tricky thing because being direct depends on the culture you're from, is sometimes a tough thing to do, or sometimes it's hard to be direct to somebody who's not used to this from their cultural background. And you don't have to be direct in all matters, but talking about self-harming behavior, once you have been given consent to talk about this, it's super important to use clear labels and for example, not talking so much about, I don't know what kind of terms people use for cutting themselves, but it's important to use something that's describing the matter. Like if somebody cuts themselves, then you can talk about that they cut themselves, and not talk about you hurt yourself. Trying to use words that are describing the behavior most exactly is important in order to be clear and direct about what you're talking about. Um, so you need to use clear labels so that both of you know what you're talking about. Yesterday I talked about positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, that might lead to higher likability of reoccurring self-harming behavior. So if you are in the position to treat wounds and or to put treatment on the inflicted injuries, it's also important to spend the time that is needed on that, but no more. Don't talk much about how things are going. Check it up, and make it. It's always tough to talk about this with volunteers. Make it as professional as possible. So if you treat a wound, it's about treatment. Check out if it's infected. Yes, no, change the band-aids or whatever you put on this, and that's it. Regarding the communication, it's also super important to set boundaries and act accordingly to these boundaries. It's sometimes when you set boundaries, they might be too, how do you say it, too much for that person. Like maybe you make them feel more distanced from yourself, and maybe this is important to you in order to deal with the situation in a professional way, or in a way that you are not suffering from. And once you set up these boundaries, for example, I talk to patients and I talk to clients that showed self-harming behavior, And then in the beginning, sometimes they started to show me the wounds over and over again, and this was something that I didn't want to see. So I needed to tell them, I don't want to see this. I will look at it once I'm doing the treatment, but after that, that's it. And if this is your boundary, you have to sometimes enforce these limits that you have, or these boundaries, and act accordingly to what you decided your boundary is. And this is something, your limits and your boundaries should not be up for discussion. So if you see, or if you realize that something is too much for you, you can set up a boundary, and you can set up your limits, and that's okay. This is not about having a consensus about how you're talking to each other or something like that. If something is making you feel uncomfortable, you can set your limits. Tell the person that this makes you uncomfortable, and that's it. And that's okay. Because you have to take care of yourself as well. And it's also okay to express your opinion on self-harming behavior, as long as this is happening without judgment. So like saying something like self-harming behavior is stupid, this might be your opinion, but this sounds judgmental. If you say something like, I think self-harming behavior is not helpful, and I believe there are other ways to deal with the problems that you have. This is an opinion that you might have, and that might differ from the person who's showing self-harming behavior. And it's okay to express this as long as you find ways to express it in a non-judgmental way. Are there any questions on that so far? Okay. Let's see if we can do. No. I try to put you into breakout sessions, but apparently this is not working with okay. Apparently we can't do this in Meet, but okay, then maybe this might feel weird, but maybe we can try to. Who of you had experiences with addressing people who showed self-harming behavior, or who encountered that on the field already? Okay. Did you find it difficult to address this?
Maybe I can start sharing. To me, I faced it several times in pathways, but it was always a bit difficult because it was always addressed to me with the aim of. It was not that I just faced it. It was also always people telling me, "Look, I cut myself because you didn't answer to my messages for 2 hours," or "Look, I cut myself because you didn't bring food this morning." So this was very, very difficult. I remember that I got used to it. When it happened the very first time, it was very difficult. I didn't really know how to handle it. I knew that it was not my fault and that it's not me that was responsible, but still I found it very violent in many ways.
Yeah. Yeah, this is something a lot of people encounter or experience when dealing with self-harming behavior. That you feel blackmailed, or people might, like yesterday I said, it's not necessarily used to manipulate people, but sometimes it is. Like you just said, to say you didn't bring food, so I had to cut myself. And when you tell this now, and I believe back then when it happened, you knew that this is not how things work. It's not I need to cut myself in order to get food, or I didn't eat anything, so I needed to cut myself. This is putting you under pressure, and this is, like you said, it's a violent act, even though it's not against yourself. The harm is not done against yourself, but the violent act is actually done against yourself. Mm, and if this happened, how did you react to that?
So when it happened first, then this person sent me pictures of the wounds. And I mean, I was on my phone. I opened it, and I felt that it was already too. I already saw it, and it was very. I don't know, but I haven't been at that place, so it was via phone. So it was maybe a bit easier for me to. But I was. It was half an hour before we had the meeting with Marina, so I was pretty much able to talk about it, but it was very difficult. And afterwards, I also understood, or yeah, I mean, then the whole understanding process started. I just realized that I really need to, yeah, to get in distance to this, but also to not take it personal, or to not let it come too close. And I mean, I also understood the situation when you are so stuck, and when you're forced to try every possible thing to do to, I don't know, get a bit. It's also a lot about freedom. Like, how can I mean, this is also what happens many times, or the reason why people do it is often because they want to see a psychiatrist because they know that they need it, but nobody cares about it, so they start getting in action, and then yeah, this is at the end. I mean, this is the topic. It's yeah.
Yeah, and that's this is a very common display of what kind of conflicts occur within ourselves when we encounter this. Because on the one hand, we have understanding for what happens, and for the hardship, and for the circumstances a person is in that might lead them to do something, let's not say bad, but something severe and something dysfunctional. On the one hand, and on the other hand, this is violating your limits and your personal space or your personal boundaries, and then still you're presented with this information, and you can't decide to know this or not know this. And yeah, again, if this is like I said before, if this happens, it's totally okay to say, I don't want to see these kind of pictures. I don't want and to be transparent about the way you act. For example, to say, I will still be seeing you, or we can still talk if you decide to do that. But I would prefer for you not to pressure me into this. And the things we are talking about today, like the addressing or the engagement with people who show self-harming behavior, I hope you are not expecting to find or to learn ways of communication that don't involve conflict, because having different opinions on something, or being overwhelmed by behavior by other people might lead to conflict, and this is also okay. It's okay to not liking being blackmailed into spending more time with the person, and then it's a delicate matter on okay, how do we deal with this, because if somebody tells you, I cut myself, look at this, and sends you a picture because you didn't bring me food, what's your first thought or your first like mental reaction on that? What's the first thing you want to do? Would you like to, for example, say, well, if you do something like that, I don't want to bring you food anymore, or this person needs to be first in line the next time we do go on distribution. What's and this is open for discussion for everybody. What are if something like this occurs to you, somebody sends you a picture of a wound, or if somebody shows you something and tells you, I did this because you didn't bring me food or because you didn't spend time with me. What are the first things that come to your mind, Marina?
I mean, I think my instinctive reaction would be to feel very guilty. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
I think it would take a minute or like a couple of minutes or a long time to sort through that emotion and realize, okay, this is not actually my fault. And then through wanting probably to compensate that guilt, I would like my instinctive reaction without like having the background knowledge maybe that I do now would be to give extra attention to this person,
Mm-hmm.
sort of
Mm-hmm.
to make up for my for my wrongdoing, even if it wasn't my fault, or like to make
Mm-hmm.
up for the pain that this person has felt,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of what like of who caused it. And
Um,
like I find it
yeah.
quite difficult to fight against that,
Mm-hmm.
like to go
Mm-hmm.
against your instinct and do exactly the opposite and stay quite distant and cool and not pay too much attention
Mm-hmm.
to the this behavior itself.
Antonia, you also wanted to say something?
Well, I would first probably try to explain why this person didn't get the food at that moment, because I believe that it's maybe the way how a person can better understand, okay, today I didn't come with the food because this and this happened. Like open communication. In that way, I'm showing that I care about this person in a way. I want to give information and explain why I didn't come. Um, I'm a little bit worried about this giving extra attention to a person because from experience, when you give extra attention to a one person, then another person is asking you, okay, why you give more to this person, why you did this, why you did that. So for me, that's the problem. Yes, instinctively, I would probably give an extra attention, but then I'm thinking about other people who is looking at this and wondering, okay, but why this person today? And I'm usually, reacting like this. I give extra attention, but then I get
Mm-hmm.
like many questions from other people. And then again, I'm explaining to other people why I did this. And it's like constantly explaining to people why I did what I did. And
Mm-hmm.
in some situations, people really understands because, when you take a time to explain, then some people you accept this, but some people just cannot. And then I have a much bigger problem to handle the people who are complaining. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe that is a part of my question, like what to do in these situations,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like never ending.
Yeah, exactly. This is from all of your what all of your what you said, what your experiences. It's really hard to stay on your personal course when something like this happens because self-harming behavior or somebody who shows you this, it leads to a big reaction for yourself because either you feel guilty or you feel repulsed, or you feel, even though you feel guilty, you think I need to act differently to what my first feeling is. um, and this is something, for me it's super important to realize when you deal with self-harming behavior that even though you're not involved in the behavior, because the person is hurting themselves. It's their decision. It's their intentional behavior that they did, but it still has an effect on your reaction. To be like, sometimes you be like, well, this is too hard. This is, the person is trying to blackmail me. I distance myself. Or you be like, shit, I did something wrong. I missed something. And I think this is what Marina was talking about. I missed something, and now I need to pay more attention to that person in order for this not to happen again. But it makes us be less free in our own behavior, and this is something I think it's important to realize that if something severe like self-harming behavior happens, somehow it sounds like an emergency and we have to react to that. And I hope this metaphor or this example is working. When a little child is running around and playing and suddenly falls down and hits the head on the floor, most times they look around and look for reaction. And if the parents or if the adults around are reacting like, oh shit, what happened? Then sometimes just after the reaction, the kid is starting to cry. And it's a bit, I'm not saying that people who show self-harming behavior be treated, supposed to be treated like little children, but this is something that happens. We all are, we are shaping our behavior sometimes also according to the reaction of our surroundings. So I behave in a certain way, and if I'm not sure how to react, I take a look around, and if I say something stupid or I'm not sure if I'm saying the right thing, I look at the faces of the people I'm talking to and see how they react. And if I don't get a reaction, or if I get a certain reaction, this also shapes my behavior, and this is also working for self-harming behavior. And to in our reactions, it's important to remember when I when I started yesterday that I talked about it's non-suicidal self-harming behavior. So there, even though it's a big step to hurt yourself, to cut yourself, or even these self-inflicted injuries might look very severe and dramatic. It's important to remember, in theory, let's say the person doesn't want to kill themselves, or they don't want to hurt themselves as bad as to be injured for a long time. and this, I think, is important to remember in order to react in a calm way. So if you see somebody, if somebody shows you a picture of their wound, you can be like, okay, this is tough, but it's not not life threatening. So of course this might be an emergency and needs to be treated, but it's not something that where you need to leave everything behind and rush to that person. And remembering this, even though it feels counterintuitive to feel guilty about it, or to feel the urge to help a person because it seems like an emergency, sometimes we can. It's important to remember that it's not as bad as it looks, so we can take a step back, breathe, and instead of acting accordingly to the guilt that we are feeling or the feeling of being blackmailed, to remember what we are talking about now, to act within the limits of our boundaries, or to still be direct and thorough about our our behavior and our reaction. Is this um, clear? Do you understand what I'm going for? Okay. Um, this whole conversation led up to what I wanted to go for next, to problems you may encounter. And it's, I think everything that you talked about is what I was thinking about before, which and was not necessarily. I was thinking about this, but I also, when I prepared this workshop, there, of course, I took the help of literature, and these are the tricky situations that professionals are writing about as well. So uh, we talked about showing compassion without providing positive reinforcement. Like, for example, what Marina said, you feel guilty and then you have the urge to be there for that person, or to see them as soon as possible. So this reaction of providing more social contact is the social reinforcement we talked about yesterday. Mm, and how to deal with these tricky situations, I will go on later. I will just go through these right now. Um, this the balance between not punishing, because so from what I gathered from all of your reactions, which is a very beautiful thing to hear and to see, you don't want to punish somebody for what they did, but you don't want to affirm that it's okay to show self-harming behavior as well, because like this reaction that some of you might have as well, even if it's just in your head. Like if somebody comes to you and shows you a wound, or talk about something like, you didn't give me enough food, so I had to cut myself. Uh, I think a very common reaction would also be to say, well, then don't come here anymore, or then you don't get food anymore if you try to do it like this. This is actual punishment, and this is something that, from what I gather from your reactions, you don't want to do. But it's hard to balance out between not affirming and not punishing. So we will get to this as well. This feeling of being blackmailed, um, also something that you experience in the field, that somebody sends you pictures with the hope of having a reaction or having a change in your behavior because they showed you that they hurt themselves. Um, mm, and these other two things are a bit more mm, regarding our own reactions or our own behavior. For example, if you don't feel like somebody is respecting your boundaries and your limits that you might have set up, or you for sure have set up these boundaries for yourself, but maybe not communicated about them. And this feels, if your limits or your boundaries are violated, this is always something that makes you feel uncomfortable. This is a very human reaction. Sometimes you feel that a certain behavior is a personal insult, or something that you take personal. If you have a personal relationship to somebody and they show self-harming behavior, and maybe even try to blackmail you, or pressure you into certain behaviors, then it's understandable to take this personal. um, if there's anything else that you feel like tricky situations that you encounter, feel free to tell me about this, and then we can add this to the list and see if you find something. Yes, Antonia.
So I have a problem with one thing. So
Yes.
I had the situations with the self-harming behavior or already, harming. And
Mhm.
in this case, I'm always trying to, be 100% supportive to a person and, talk. Here in Croatia, we are always trying to like find a professional psychologist for these kind of people. It's not always easy because there's not a lot of capacity for that. So usually we are the ones who are taking the responsibility for a person.
Mhm.
And my problem is when I'm like starting to, be a support to a person. In one point, a person will call you, text you, and it's fine for sometimes, but not always.
Mhm.
Because in one point I don't know anymore what to say, in a way like how to express, okay, today I really don't feel, good to, support you, or today I cannot, or, I have my other life other than this.
Mhm.
And I'm always trying to like explain why I'm not available now, but
Mhm.
also like this person is getting used to my support. So when I express that I cannot, or if I'm not available, then this person is reacting like very, emotional. And it's not that
Mhm.
I feel guilty. I don't feel guilty if I cannot, but my problem is how to explain to a person or to like set a boundary, um, in case when I really cannot provide a support that this person needs. And then that point. And also, I'm not a professional, so
Mhm.
it's very difficult sometimes, to know exactly what is happening and to react
Mhm.
accordingly.
Mhm. Um, yeah, I will maybe just jump in on that question now. um, so if you're overwhelmed by, first of all, um, I don't want to get into like this toxic positivity thing and always see the good side on everything, but there is a good side on that. If somebody opens up to you, if you provided support to them, be too much, and it's okay that this is too much at some point, but it's also showing that the person trusts you, which is a nice thing. Saying this, um, still you have your boundaries and you have your own limits, and this might be time, this might be capacity of how much of stressful things you can take in to your life. And mm, this is something you want to respect everybody, and people should respect you as well. So it's hard. I believe it's hard to show these boundaries, but it's also okay. And sometimes, for example, when working with people on the move, and this is of course up for discussion, but it's something. It sounds hard, but it's also important to remember people on the move made a big journey um, and made a lot of experiences and got to the place where you meet them without your help. So that shows that they are having resources, and of course, it's great to help people, and it's people on the move are in need of support. But once you are getting to your limits, it's sometimes important to also remember that you are not responsible for their well-being in total, right? um, and it's important to set boundaries and to say why you can't do this. And it's a difference between if somebody messages you or calls you and you just don't answer because it's that I guess feels wrong for yourself as well. But if you set boundaries, that means that you communicate them as well. So you can, it's like a very easy recipe for that is to tell people what you're doing and why you're doing this. So if you say, let's say, you can message me whenever you need something, but I won't be answering on the weekends and after 6 o'clock in the afternoon because then I'm off, and that's okay. And you can, and if people don't like it, it's or if people feel offended by this, it's also okay for them to feel offended. It's not your responsibility in that case. Your primary responsibility is to look after yourself, because we will get to this later on, but it's repeating is also a great way of learning. Of course, it would be nice if people would respect all of your boundaries, but in the end, it's your own responsibility to set these boundaries and to take care of your own limits. Mm. And once somebody comes to you with the urge or with the need, and this is colliding with what you can do, maybe, and this is something that's really difficult once we are talking about working with human beings, because we see that we could do something more, but maybe we can't because it's exhausting, or because we don't have the resources, or because we don't have the time, or it can also be because if you start caring, supporting, then it has no end. And in the end, you are suffering from that. And if you are suffering, all of the people you try to support are suffering too. And this is something we sometimes lose or get out of focus. That as long as you are able to support a person, or you're not supporting one person, you're supporting a lot of people. In order to keep this going, you sometimes need to stop at a point where you could go further, but you need to act within your limits. And this is something now that we talk about, everybody will agree, I guess, or will be like, yeah, I think so too. But once we encounter somebody who is in desperate need or makes us feel that they need our help more than anybody else, we might be a bit soft on our own boundaries, and then this can happen once. It's okay, and of course, you always decide yourself what you want to do and what you don't want to do. But if this happens too often, we get overwhelmed, we get exhausted, and maybe we get even burnt out. So this is something that we need to keep in mind. Was this helpful? Okay. So let's get to these tricky situations and how to deal with it. Showing compassion without providing positive reinforcement. This is, most of these things are connected, of course, and I try to isolate problems in order to maybe help us think about problems in a different way, because most times, like all of these tricky situations, all of the things that are written here might occur together, and we are not realizing that these are different things. We are just having a bad feeling, and trying to separate these things into smaller pieces makes it easier to deal with it. And of course, if I talk about this, it sounds like I'm always like I know what I'm doing and I always do this, and it's not like this. Of course not. From my personal experience, it's dealing with people with self-harming behavior or with difficult behaviors in general also leaves me with a bad feeling sometimes. And then, of course, I can't go to the person and say, your behavior is difficult. Let's look at, of course, I can do this, but it's requiring much more insight on what's happening. And this is what I'm going for with this chapter of the workshop, to see the smaller parts that make us feel bad and how to deal with this and how to react to these things. So getting out of a situation where somebody sent you a picture of a self-inflicted wound, or talking to somebody with self-harming behavior, sometimes just leaves us with a bitter taste in our mouth and our mind. And then we can see, okay, what am I doing? Why am I feeling bad about this? And these are the typical situations you might encounter. So showing compassion without providing positive reinforcements, it's a very big deal. And like I just said, with the example of Antonia, it's super important to, now that you took part in the workshop, maybe this afternoon you can think about your limits and where you draw your clear line. And maybe you have an idea and then you encounter a situation and you need to reassess this. So but just because we might go above and beyond our limits in one case doesn't mean that we have to do this all the time. So we can, when I say draw a clear line between the circumstances and the self-harming behavior, this is what we talked about yesterday a lot, like to see what led up to a person doing this, and we can all understand this, but we can still oppose this behavior. You can say, it's hard to live in a squad. I know that you went on game for a lot of times and it's frustrating and the system is bad. And we can show compassion to all of this and then still say, but cutting yourself is something that I don't agree with. And even if we understand, or if it's hard, we don't necessarily need to convince our counterpart or the person who shows self-harming behavior that our clear line is the right thing. But it's important for us to, in order to show compassion for the situation without providing too much positive reinforcement, to have this clear in our mind. And even though we understand the circumstances and we understand the hardship, self-harming behavior is not an inevitable consequence of the circumstances, because when you look at the squads, if you look at the people on the move, not everybody is showing self-harming behavior. So there's a lot of people who have similar experiences without showing this, and this is an example for what I wrote there, that it's not an inevitable consequence of the underlying circumstances. Yeah. Is this clear so far? Do you have any questions on that, or difficulties or challenges that you might encounter when you hear this or listen to this? Okay. The other part of not wanting to punish and also not wanting to affirm self-harming behavior, what I found helpful is, and that's it's just one sentence there, but it's a big chapter, let's say, to address non-suicidal self-harming behavior in a neutral and non-judgmental way. So, like I said, using clear labels, saying, okay, you cut yourself, not necessarily going so much about why did you do it, what could you have done differently, but more about, okay, this happens. I see your problem, and going on about trying to find solutions for the circumstances, not so much for the self-harming behavior. And this is something we talk about this now, and it's once you put this into practice, I find this really hard to stay neutral, because you might be overwhelmed, like Antonia said, or you might be angry, or you might be sad. And then not necessarily being angry at the person who's showing self-harming behavior, but also at the circumstances. And this is a big task for us as professionals or as volunteers, to move within the system or within these circumstances that are shitty, and still try to provide a neutral stance in order for a person to say, this is shitty, this is not okay, but let's see what we can do about the things that we are able to change, like doing distros and providing support, not because somebody cut themselves, but because this is what you do. Is this understandable, or is this something you want to discuss a bit more, or you think you might encounter trouble with?
I find it really, really, really difficult to not show this positive reinforcement, because when I experience these very, very desperate moments for myself, I also had moments where I found it kind of re-traumatizing when people do not react to me in this super, super caring way. And this is also what I'm a bit scared about too. Yeah, well, it's very, very difficult to not, because this is what we learn, no, that we react to it in a very warm and caring way. I think it really needs a lot of practice for me personally.
Yeah, and when I write about showing compassion without providing positive reinforcement, this is something it's really hard to measure, right? It's because sometimes we show compassion and it's still positive reinforcement, but it's not like we don't have a machine that's a positive reinforcement meter that we can put next to us when we have a conversation with somebody who showed self-harming behavior, and then in the end see if we were just compassionate or if we actually provided positive reinforcement. And it's a conundrum that it's really hard to get rid of. And sometimes it's we need to find a balance, and this is, like you said, it's really hard because every person that we deal with or that we talk to is different from another person, and every situation is different. And sometimes when you found a flow or a way to be compassionate without showing positive reinforcement with one person, maybe this is already too much in another situation. In the end, you will only find out by trying. And I mean, the worst thing, like, and that's why I think it's important to remember that that it's called non-suicidal self-harming behavior, because even if it reoccurs, it's still non-suicidal, and it might be a health hazard, and it might lead to health consequences or to bad consequences for the person. But if it's not, you're not failing if somebody shows self-harming behavior again after you might have been too compassionate on, and by this showing positive reinforcement. It's not your fault. It's not, you're not failing at what we are talking about. It's because you're not showing this behavior. You're not making the person cut themselves or hurt themselves. The person did this behavior intentionally and by their free will, let's say. So a big part of dealing with self-harming behavior is also to accept that it might reoccur. We can do our best, and I don't know, read all the books about it, go to all the workshops, and make a lot of experiences on the field, and still there might be self-harming behavior reoccurring, and that's not your fault. If it's somebody's fault, if you want to judge it like this, it's always the person who is showing the self-harming behavior. So it's not about doing everything right on the first try, and if something is not working out, that you did everything wrong. It's about finding a way and learning together with that person, for example, what's the right thing to do. And I know this might not be the thing that you want to hear, but it's a big part, and it's what I really want to go for with this workshop is to see that even if something occurs that is not going according to your plans, it's not necessarily your fault, or it's not your fault at all. And self-harming behavior is something that might reoccur all the time, and you can do your best. And even if you do everything, you're not the only person somebody who shows self-harming behavior is having contact with. So even if you don't positively reinforce that, it might be somebody else. So you're in control of your own behavior, not of the behavior of other people. And this is something super important to keep in mind. And it's frustrating as well, for sure. Was this helpful a little bit? Okay.
I would like to.
Yes.
What comes up to mind is that for me, I think that things would be very different if it. I mean, it's totally different if you are dealing like with when someone becomes a friend, then
Mm-hmm.
a different situation, right? For example, if I imagine myself encountering this situation with a POM I really get along with, and I have built up a relationship with, then I think I would react in a very different in a very different way than if I encounter someone who I don't know very much, or I can, like then all this assertiveness and steadiness and stability you really need to be compassionate, but at the same time like not be like positive reinforcement stuff. Then I think it's something we could also like take into account, no? Like
Mm-hmm.
what is the distance between you and the person you are trying to support? And
And why do you think it's more difficult with somebody that you are friends with or you have a deeper relationship with than with somebody that you just met once?
I think in my personal case, I think I would get way more carried away by all the emotions
Mm-hmm.
of
Yeah.
the situation. Yeah, and I
Yeah,
think that would be
of course.
negative for
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And that's not a negative thing. It's a great thing that if you engage with somebody that you like, of course there's your relationship plays a part in that. If you just when I was working in the hospital, when I met patients for the first time, it was much easier to be thorough and have a clear line. And once they spent 3-4 weeks in the hospital, I understood much more of the underlying circumstances, and it was sometimes harder to be direct. And because we are building relationships, and then, like I said before, the behavior of the person is triggering a reaction within myself. And then people, in my example, patients left the hospital because they got better, for example. But a couple of weeks later, they came back, and this was also hard to not take this personal, because you were like, come on, we worked on that. And it's okay to have all these feelings. And sometimes, and this is something to, let's say, to use professional distance, even though you have a relationship with somebody, to remember, how would I deal with that person if I didn't have all of this? And it's really hard to it's like really mental acrobatics to do this, because getting out of the relationship in theory, just in order to behave in a certain way when you talk about self-harming behavior, and then get back into the relationship, is really tough. And it's something that that needs a lot of practice. And like I said before, there is no right and wrong way. Sometimes maybe because you are a friend, you spend more time. But it's important to ask yourself, am I spending more time with that person because we have a personal relationship? Or am I spending more time with that person because they pressured me into this by showing self-harming behavior? Because, for example, I think all of you have friends that talk to you about their problems, or family members or whoever. And of course, if somebody needs more, if you engage with a person more often because they call you, for example, of course you're spending more time with them. And if this is occurring while they're having a problem, you're not necessarily spending more time with them because they have a problem, but because this is what's happening at that moment. And this is something, what I'm going for is, it's important to still feel that you are in control of your own behavior. And while you're in control of your own behavior, you can also say, okay, I draw my clear lines. But if you're feeling like you're just reacting to something bad happening or to something overwhelming happening, then maybe you're not in control anymore, and this is making you prone to being burned out, for example. And I would love to leave you after the workshop with a recipe of how to behave in the right way. But this is, as long as we are working with people, this is not happening, unfortunately. But the most important part is that you find a way for yourself to look yourself in the face in the mirror and say, what I did was okay. And sometimes it happens that we do something that goes beyond our limits, and then we realize this a couple of hours or a couple of days later, and then we can adjust our behavior accordingly. And that's also okay. It's okay that if you maybe provided positive reinforcement to somebody at some point, and the next time, then you realize this later, and the next time you act different when you meet them, and they might not like it, but it's your decision on how you behave and how you react. Was this a bit helpful?
Yeah, it's very helpful. I think the idea of professional distance is something it really helps me to kind of think about this about this relationship and to be in control of one's own behavior, I think, and to pay attention to this. No, I think that's really important.
Yes. And sometimes, even if it feels like you are being harsh or cold or something, it's like I said, it's not about being right or wrong, and sometimes you're doing the right thing and it still feels wrong, or you because you need to get used to being professionally distanced. Um, Antonia wanted to say something, and Marina too. Who wants to go first? Antonia was first.
Uh, maybe I just want to share one of my experiences with self-harming behavior and actually committing a suicide. So had a friend who actually committed suicide. I was the one who was supporting him the whole time, and when this happened, of course, I was devastated. But then, in one point, I just realized, it was a decision of a person. It
Mm-hmm.
was not my decision, and I don't have anything to do with this decision. So, in some way, how I respected him as a person when he was alive, I started to respect him um, as a person who made a decision. So I started to respect a decision, and this helped me a lot to go through all of this because I think it's very important to understand that. We are all making our own decisions based on what we feel, what we think is right. So in this case, maybe this will help you to just try to think about this as Fabian also is pointing out all the time. It's a decision of another person, and what you can do is just to respect the decision and not take this personally, because it's not about you, it's about the person, and you are the one who actually take a time to support the person, and this is the best thing what you can do in this case. But you are not the one who can change the decision of a person. You are the one who can maybe just follow the process and do your best, and for sure this person knows that and appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. And that's a super important part that we talk about decisions and also about like whatever we do, like we as human beings, let's say, our actions have consequences, and this is like what we are doing right now. Of course, we are taking time for this, and we are talking about this theoretically, but this is also something that you can do to some extent with a person that showed self-harming behavior. That you talk about um, actions have consequences. Talk about what you feel about this, and even when I said professional distance is important, but it's also professional closeness that is important, and that's shown by doing exactly what we do right now. You can also do on the field that you talk about something like um, even if you find hard to decide how to react, you can also talk about this. You can talk about you can talk to a person about, you know what, I don't know what to do right now. I'm not sure what I can do, and then maybe find solutions together. Um, yeah, Marina, you wanted to say something as well.
Yes. Um, and I'm not saying this because I want a solution for that, but it's just something that I think me and a lot of people experience on the field, and I just wanted to acknowledge it like in this workshop, and that is that we are talking about a lot of strategies that involve verbal communication, and that the people we work with on the field, like a lot of times we don't really have a common language that we speak. So I like, for me personally, that just adds up. Like, it's complicated enough. It's but like a lot of topics, but this topic in particular. And then if you don't have like a common language to communicate in, for me it just adds another level of complication to it. Again, not saying that I have or want a solution for that. But I think it's just important to acknowledge that for ourselves, that that is something that makes it even more difficult to deal with
Mm-hmm.
this.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, yeah, that's like most of the things that we talk about. Of course, it's important to draw a line and to have limits and communicate these limits, but it's the first step is always to look at yourself and see this for yourself. And of course, there's communication difficulties, but the first step is always to look at ourselves as well, like on our own limits and our own boundaries and our own behavior. And this, of course, it's much easier if we can be vocal about it and we can talk about this, but it's also possible to do this in a non-verbal way. And the first part is, of course, to make up our own minds and maybe talk about our limits with our colleagues and our friends, our team, before talking about our limits with the people on the field. I mean, moving on to
I
other
want to
tricky
ask
situations
something.
when you, for example, feel. Yes.
I want to ask something like, would it be correct to, like, also according to what Marina said about language barriers, sometimes it's easier alone. I kind of try to put myself in the situation. I would rather use very easy sentences, as something that I would tend to say is don't do that. Is it something which we should rather not do, because it goes a bit against this respect for the decision and for the person in an extended way?
I think it's or from what I encountered, this is when you say don't do this or stop doing this, this puts you in a difficult position, because I would always like use these I messages that for example, that you can say I wouldn't do this, or I don't think that this is a solution to the problem, or I don't think that this is helpful, because you can talk about what you think and what your experiences are. And when you build a relationship with the person and you tell them, I mean, we all remember that, I definitely remember when I was a kid and my parents told me that I shouldn't do something and I still did it, I felt guilty about this. So it was sometimes even harder to admit that I did it, because I knew that I shouldn't have done it. And so if you talk about yourself and you say, I think this is not the right way, or this is something problematic, this is also showing compassion. And once you, of course, it's easier to say don't do it, but it's opening the door for people to have secondary negative emotions, like feeling guilty about this. And then maybe they distance themselves from you because they feel ashamed to admit that they did something that they know you don't like. And I'm pretty sure most people who show self-harming behavior know that the people around them don't like it and think that this is not the right way to do it. So yeah. I wouldn't recommend to tell somebody to stop doing this in this direct way. I would talk more about how I feel about it, and that I think there are different ways to deal with it, or or that you can also say, I would like you to stop doing this, or I would feel better if you wouldn't cut yourself. It's still pressuring at some point, but it's different from forbidding to do this, because you say, I would feel better about it, or I'm sad when I see that you cut yourself, because you're talking about yourself and you're not giving orders. Is this was this helpful? Okay. So talking about when you feel blackmailed, it's important to remember that self-harming behavior rarely occurs in order to manipulate. We had this different example of people sending pictures and saying, I cut myself because you didn't do this, or I want you to do this and that. And it's in this case as well, it's okay to talk about yourself and saying, I have a difficult feeling about this, because now I don't feel like I'm doing a distro like I did before, because now I feel that I have to do it because you showed me this, and this is something I feel bad about. It's always we had in one group we had a big discussion about being a volunteer is not being professional, and that's a big part, of course. But on the one hand, and I think you can also use this, because in cases of self-harming behavior, or if you feel manipulated or blackmailed, it's also okay to say that you don't feel good about doing something because you feel pressured. And again, it's like always, if you give feedback to somebody, they might take it or not. But this is where your limits of control end. I can tell somebody that I feel blackmailed by what they did, or that I feel uncomfortable if they show me pictures and expect a certain behavior. And that does not necessarily lead to them stopping this, but I can be sure that I told them how I feel about it, and then I gave the responsibility for the consequences to them. And this goes together with the next point, that you might not respect your own boundaries. This is something we talked about a lot today. Communicating your limits and your boundaries is super important. Maybe if there's language problems, it's also important to communicate this to your team, that you might say, there occurred something and this is tough for me, because the most important thing about your own limits is that you know your own limits. And of course, it's nice, and with our friends and our team members and our colleagues, most times people respect our boundaries because they know them. Bye, Antonia. Have a great weekend. But in the end, it always comes back to us being responsible for respecting, or for ensuring that our limits are not crossed. And a great way to do this is to communicate this, and to be sure what our limits are. And the great thing is about our own limits, that they are not set in stone. So I can, if I have a good day and I feel like I have a lot of energy, I can be a bit more flexible with my limits. And if I have a bad day, or if some things are harder for me to tolerate than others, and I can act accordingly. I can have my limits like this on one day, and I can somehow adjust them another day after having more experiences, for example. And in the end, I'm just responsible towards myself. And yeah, and this is something I think it's a little bit sad, and also a great thing at the same time, because we are responsible for respecting our limits ourselves, which is a great liberating and empowering thing to know. And on the other hand, it might leave us feeling alone, because in the end, it is us who are responsible for the consequences of our actions and for our limits. Okay. Talking about our limits and our boundaries might lead people to behave in what we perceive as hostile. So if I tell somebody that this is enough or too much, and I don't want to talk about this anymore, and there are needs that are colliding, or values that are colliding, or in this example of somebody shows me a picture of a self-inflicted injury, or they show me a self-inflicted injury while I'm talking to them, and I say, I don't want to see this. This is too much. I don't like to see this. People might, because they still want to show you, they might get more, like pressuring or something, and this might feel like hostile behavior. And people might not feel understood and get angry because of that. And this is also something where language barrier comes in a lot, because if, like we said, if communication skills are low, not because people are not theoretically able to express their needs, but because they can't express their needs because we don't have a common language, this might lead to frustration, and frustration might lead to anger, and then it's important to not take this personal, because of course there's like all of these circumstances that are difficult and hard, like the border situation, the politics, not having papers, and all of that, and it's really hard to address this to somebody, because it's just the way it is. And sometimes people address the anger to whoever is next to them. And so we are, as volunteers or as professionals, sometimes we are like a let's say like a screen where all of this angriness or this anger and frustration get projected to. And it's tough, and it's something that might cross our boundaries and limits, and it's okay to feel bad about this, and but also take some time in your mind and think about if the person is actually angry with you, or maybe angry with something else that you don't have to take personal. If this happens, it's important to show that you understand that somebody is angry, or that you see that somebody is angry, and you might understand this from their perspective, but also tell or show that you have a different perspective to what you're doing. And like I said before, if you are talking about your own limits and your own boundaries, and using simple languages to show why you act this way, and like what you want to do and why you want to do it. And also, like I said before, when we talk about self-harming behavior and opposing to that kind of behavior, to the problem, we talked about why it's problematic, and the person who's showing self-harming behavior might not agree to that, but that does not necessarily mean, you can also say that this is not up for discussion. Because I guess from what we all agreed upon by being in this workshop, we say self-harming behavior is something that's not helpful, and so this is something you don't have to discuss with the person. They might tell you why it's important to them, but you can always agree to disagree, even though this is something that feels very hard. Okay. Are you all on board with this? Do you understand what I was going for into this? So we talked a little bit about a lot about tricky situations that you might encounter, and what I think, or what I really want you to take home from that part is that even though it's always an interaction between you and somebody else, there's a lot of things that we need to take care of ourselves. Like not like it's a tricky situation, or it's a difficult part of dealing with self-harming behaviors. On the one hand, you don't want to hurt somebody or impose behavior on them, but on the other hand also, and don't violate their limits and boundaries, and on the other hand also take care of your own boundaries. So when dealing with self-harming behavior, a lot of times that means that you have to double check with yourself and with that person you're talking to, and that makes it also hard. Okay. Moving on. Like when we talked about the tricky situations and how to engage and talk to people, and like I said before, it's important to take care of ourselves, and it's something I can't stress enough, because of course sometimes we go above and beyond what we are capable of or what our limits are, and we do this out of compassion, or we do this because it's one of our values that we know. I want to do as much as I can do, and if I see injustice, I want to fight against this. This is, I guess, what a lot of you brings into activism. But we also have to take into account that we can only do as much as we are capable of doing, and this has an end. And more than we can do, more than what we can do. And like I said before, it's our own responsibility to check that our boundaries and limits are respected and that we don't burn out. And this is why I put this part of coping and self-care for volunteers in here as well, because like we heard before, non-suicidal self-harming behavior is an act of violence, not necessarily. It's an act of violence by that person against themselves. So perpetrator and victim are the same person, and that leaves us with a difficult moral psychological assessment. But it's also witnessing violence, even if it's not addressed to ourselves, is also it's experiencing violence. If you also might know that from reports of pushbacks, for example, this is violence that was harm that was done by other people to other people that are not you, and still you're this is affecting you emotionally. And the same goes with self-harming behavior, that it's a violent act, and this does not leave us unaffected. Because whenever we witness violence, this puts us into distress. And I talked about people being traumatized during their being on the move, and that they are in survival mode. And as soon as we witness violence, it is at some point this puts our brain into survival mode, because we see something that's violent, and it's a very, let's say, primitive structure in our brain that puts us into survival mode, and it's not necessarily distinguishing between, is this violence that occurs to myself or whatever. But if we witness violence and this puts us into distress, there are stress reactions in our brain, and this is something we, even if we are not harmed ourselves, still need to take into account, because it's taking up resources that we might need for something else. And so it's also okay to have an emotional reaction. It's not only okay, it's part of being human to have an emotional reaction, to be sad or angry or disgusted, or ashamed, or whatever happens. This is part of a healthy psychological mechanism within ourselves. So you don't have to be ashamed if you encounter self-harming behavior and you have emotional reaction to that. That's super important to have this, because this makes you humane. And like I said before, when we talked about the tricky situations, and I would like to give you a recipe on how to react, we can talk about a lot of situations. We can take the whole day and talk about how can you react in certain situations, and still there might occur another situation where we are not prepared for. So you never have to be perfect, because this is a goal that's unachievable. And like I said before, you're a human being and not a humanitarian aid machine. And it's okay to make mistakes, or it's okay to not have solutions for every problem. And you can always, if you want to, you can always see a situation that you couldn't solve to your satisfaction as a learning moment where you can take something away. And even if you can't learn from that moment, it's also okay that things happen the way that they happen. Any questions on that, or any thoughts? Okay. We talked a little bit about your experiences on the field when we talked about tricky situations, but I would also like to talk about your experiences on the field, on less on engaging with people who show self-harming behavior, but more about how this leaves you. Like I think Leandro said before that it's different if you have a personal relationship to a person. And I wanted to ask you if you want to share something that when maybe you encountered self-harming behavior and had to deal with this afterwards, like being stressed about it or being sad, or what kind of feelings did it trigger within you? Marina said something earlier on that she felt guilty because I don't know why you said feeling guilty because you didn't feel like you're doing the right thing or doing enough. What was it about?
I think back then we were talking about like the situation if somebody were to show me a self-harm, like, or the effects of their self-harming behavior, and like pointing it onto me, that my initial reaction would probably be guilt, even if I know that this has nothing to do with me. I mean, personally, honestly, like this is something that is really hard for me to see. Like seeing wounds that are self-inflicted. Like I can see blood, I can see wounds, like I'm normally quite good with that, but like for some reason knowing that this wound has been self-inflicted just sends like shivers down my spine. So this is something that I obviously also don't like try not to show to people, but like for me it's just something that I personally really makes me feel like, I don't know, it has just a stronger effect on me than maybe other wounds.
Okay. Anybody else has experiences from the field that about your emotional reactions to self-harming behavior?
Yeah, on my experience, what I when self-harming behavior is presented as a consequences of something that I did, then I feel really angry. Like rather than guilty and other things, I feel really angry because I think emotionally I cannot bear the fact that I mean I cannot. The reaction would be to take distance on this person because I cannot understand why a person that claims to care about me is doing this to me. Of course, the answer is like, it's not that they don't care, it's that they have a dysfunctional way of being in relationship. But like on an emotional point of view, it's really difficult for me to make this reasoning and to assume it.
Anybody else wants to share their experiences? Okay. Again, this is like when we talk about coping with encountering self-harming behavior, like I said before, this is something, it triggers a reaction. Maybe guilt, maybe anger, maybe with this there come secondary emotions, because maybe I have compassionate or friendly feelings towards a person, and then they show me this and I'm angry, and I maybe not satisfied with my reaction because I don't want to be angry, because I know that this is not something people do to offend me, but still I have this reaction. And I think it's important to talk about this, because a part of self-care is to accept these kind of reactions that we are having, because they are all part of our well-being and of our emotional household, let's say. And this reaction that Marina mentioned, I think is also super important. But sometimes we don't want to show people what we are feeling, and sometimes it's I wouldn't say it's a good or a bad thing, but sometimes this is working in a situation, and it's important, or it's a good idea to not show emotional reactions. And sometimes it's important to at least be vocal about it, like to tell the person that seeing the wounds or makes you feel bad or angry, and even if you don't talk to the person who showed self-harming behavior, sometimes it's also super important to talk to your peers to sort out what you're feeling, because a lot of times it's not just one feeling, it's different feelings, and it's easier to to cope with them when you talk to somebody else. Does not necessarily need to be the person who showed the self-harming behavior, but it's really important to talk about this in your teams, for example. And something that I also get a lot from when I work with the teams on the field, that something big or something bad happens and you still want to do everything like it's planned. You still want to go on with your day like you planned it. And if something stressful happens to you, and like I said, witnessing violence, even if it's just violence by a person against themselves, is putting you into distress, it's important to take time to yourself. You don't need to take the whole day off, but appreciate that your emotional reactions take time to process. So, and again, if it feels like this is taking up too much time, bear in mind that on the long run, as a long-term consequence, if you don't take time to yourself and to process what you witnessed or what you see, there is the possibility that you might not be able to keep on working, or that not necessarily that you burn out, but that that the stress is taking up more resources that you might need for your voluntary work as well. Okay. And this is, like I said, it's great that you have the teams and the crews to work with and it's super important to support each other and be there for each other. So we talked a lot about when you experienced or when you witnessed self-harming behavior, but like I said before, it's important to talk about this in your teams and in your groups. So if you're not the person who had the stressful experience, you can still be proactive and reach out to somebody, and you don't need to wait for them to talk. You can always ask if somebody needs to talk about something, or if this is something I experienced as well when, for example, in the hospital, when there were difficult situations with my patients, I appreciated it so much when my colleagues came to me and said, "Hey, this was really tough. Do you want to talk about this?" And even if I just said, "No, it's okay for me," or "Yeah, it was tough," and this was the conversation, that's okay. And not being pressured into talking, and also like you don't have to pressure somebody else, and you don't have to pressure yourself. Give yourself time to think about this. Maybe go for a smoke, have a tea, have a coffee, get out of the situation, and once it's done, or when it's enough for you, and give yourself time to think about what's happening. You don't have to push it away in order to keep on going. And sometimes taking 5 minutes or 10 minutes to reflect on what you experienced is enough, or is already helpful, and it doesn't haunt you in your sleep, for example. All of these things go as a group member, but also to yourself. If you're not sure what you need, you can ask. Of course, you can ask the person you're talking to, but you can also ask yourself. And this is what you can take your time for when you have a tea or a coffee or a cigarette after. Pay attention to yourself. Be a good listener to yourself. And if you don't want to talk to somebody else, sometimes it's good to have a journal, for example, and to write things down that happened to you. So this is also like all of these things work as a group and also as self-care. Whenever you feel like there's something missing, or you're not sure how to do this, feel free to ask. And of course, a lot of these things also work in order to, if you know, or if you have, if you suspect somebody to have been shown self-harming behavior, you can also apply these rules or these ideas to the person you're talking to. Also, if you were in distress, sometimes an everyday task feels overwhelming, and that's also okay. So if you come back from the field and somebody showed you a big wound, and then maybe you come home, or you come back to your house, and you would like to cook, but you can't because you just feel overwhelmed, exhausted by that. That's okay. And if you realize that somebody else is having trouble like this, easy everyday tasks are something easy to do, and something that really shows a lot of support. And again, this also goes for dealing with people who show self-harming behavior, that might, when this is shown because somebody is overwhelmed with everyday tasks, or is overwhelmed with everyday tasks after that, what you do, like doing distros and so on, is a big support already. If somebody is not talking about what they do, or if they distance themselves, it's rarely a personal thing. It's more, it shows more than that maybe the person needs time to process. And it's always easy to say, don't take it personally if somebody is not engaging with you or is retreating from a situation. But it's a big part of working with people to, on the one hand, bringing your personality and yourself to the table, and on the other hand, not taking things that your counterpart does personally. Being patient is also a big virtue in working with people. It goes together with no pressure, or not pressuring somebody into doing something. It is super important to be patient also with yourself when you feel stressed. Sometimes it goes away really fast and you can go back to your normal life within minutes, and sometimes it takes more time, and then it's important to be patient with yourself and not pressuring you to get back into action. Validation of feelings and providing options is something that's super important when you talk to somebody about how they feel and they act like, or you feel that they don't know what's happening to them. It's always nice to provide options that you can say. For example, are you feeling sad, or are you feeling angry, or are you feeling guilty about this? And sometimes this is easier to choose from a set of options than to explain yourself what you need or what you feel like. Yeah, and of course it's super important to take care of yourself, because when you see loved ones, or if you see friends, or even if you see people that you just have a professional relationship with suffer, this means stress, and this is something that you encounter a lot on the field. So it's super important to take care of yourself in order to recharge your resources that you need to keep up the good work. And yeah, these are things that you can do to yourself and also to the person, to the people you work with, your colleagues, your friends, and also to the people on the move. It's super important, and this is something we talk a lot about in the groups, and it's something that I myself need to remind myself of, that it's normal to have reactions, to be angry about things that are not going the way that you want them to go. It's okay it's normal to be angry about the situation at the border. It's normal to have a emotional reaction to being blackmailed or feeling blackmailed, or it's also more normal to be maybe repulsed or feeling guilty if something like this occurs. And this is what I really liked about the discussion earlier on, that we talk about this, and by talking about this, I realized, or I saw that a lot of you have similar experiences. So this is actually proving the point that this is normal to have this. I put patience here again because repetition is helpful to learn. Like I said before, be patient with yourself, take your time, and try not to judge. Accepting a situation, accepting that something is normal, does not mean that you agree with what happened, but it means that you acknowledge that things are the way that they are. And from this acknowledgement and from this acceptance, once you reach that point, from there you can get back into action. But if you judge yourself or put yourself down because you have a reaction that you don't like, or that feels unpleasant, is not very helpful most of the times, because it takes up a lot of energy to fight against something that we don't like. Creating safe spaces is also a super important thing for yourself, for your team, and also for people who show self-harming behavior. And talking about safe spaces and informal squads or informal camps at the border is kind of a weird thing, but having a safe space doesn't necessarily mean that this is a place, but it can also be when you talk to somebody that you take them to a place where they are where they can talk freely, where other people are not listening, or just being around somebody can create a safe space. And there is not necessarily much you have to do that, to create a safe space, and it has a lot of power. So and this is a big part of dealing with people who show self-harming behavior. What you can do to for yourself when you encounter stress is to relieve this kind of stress, because most times stress, anger, sadness, a lot of emotions mobilize a lot of energy within ourselves, because maybe we have to fight something or we have to deal with something, and this comes from, let's say, the Stone Age, and when something that was stressful or threatening really meant that you had to fight for your life, and so we activated a lot of energy and resources, which are not used when you sit around and talk about your feelings. So it's also important to find ways of physical exercise to relieve this kind of energy when you feel like it. And it's also super important to not isolate yourself or other people, to reach out to people that you trust. And again, remember that if somebody reaches out to you and even talks about something that you don't like or that feels stressful, it also kind of means that the person trusts you if they let you in on something like that. Do you have any questions on that so far? What's also super important is sorry, to not compare yourself to others, and that's also something, like, all of these things also helpful to deal to show to a person who's showing self-harming behavior, because we can all experience the same thing and all have different reactions to that because of our own history, because of our own stress tolerance or whatever. So it's it's always tough to compare yourself to others, because you are not others, you're yourself, and everybody reacts differently to different things. And this is something that we also need to acknowledge. And sometimes if the same thing or a similar thing happens over again, this might trigger a previous trauma. And it's not a sign of weakness, not at all, if you experience pain because of something that you see, or if you are reminded of something that's hurtful to yourself or stressful, when somebody shows you self-harming behavior, for example. Like that's what I do all day. Be vocal about what you're doing. Talk to your friends, to your family, to your loved ones around you about what you need and what you don't need. I totally get if we have the feeling of people should understand what we need, or people that know me should provide me with what I need, even if I don't talk about it. But this is the most beautiful thing that can happen if somebody just does what you need in that point. But it rarely happens, because at some point you have to tell people what they need, what you need, and what they should do. So be vocal about what you need. And if you feel like this is something that makes you look needy or something, it's in the end always helpful to yourself and also to your surroundings to let them know what you need. And even if you're on the field, or if you feel like you are privileged in your situation, you can still treat yourself. You can still do things that are nice to yourself, and that does not mean that you're taking advantage of somebody else's difficult situation. But as long as you take care of yourself, you can take care of others better. So these can be nice little things, like in the team, when you give each other a massage at the end of the day, or if you cook together, if you have the luxury of having a bathtub, that you take a bath or you take a trip, or just something like I said before, having a nice cup of tea and reflect on what happened. This is something I always, I like to look at this myself, because it's a nice reminder, and I show this a lot to people I work with, because it's, like I said, you are responsible for looking after your own limits and your own boundaries, and being an activist is putting us into a difficult situation, because it's, if you do what you love, of course you don't work a day in your life, but you work super fucking hard all the time, and it's hard to separate the work or the activism from the rest of your life. And it's not that you just stop being an activist and then be something else. So it sounds a bit sarcastic, maybe it is also, but it's important to remind that that if we do what we love, we tend to forget about our limits. And this is something I want you to take home, that you take care of yourself as well. And you don't have, like, of course you have to take care of your own limits yourself, but you can always be there for each other and for your friends and your team. When you feel overwhelmed, you don't need to express exactly what happens to you. It's also okay to just say, this is too much right now, I don't know what it is, but I need help. And then you can figure it out together with your friends. And I repeated this a lot, and now I wrote it down as well. You can only take good care of others when you take care of yourself. Yeah. So this is basically what my presentation was of today. I would like to take the last minutes to reflect with you what you take home from this, and maybe we can go around the virtual room, and everybody can maybe give some feedback and say what you found helpful, or if there are any questions that are open and what you might need help with. I will call you and maybe start with the guys, Leandro and Jakob. Maybe you want to give some feedback on what you can take home for yourself and for the work.
Jakob, you want to start? You want to start? Please. No, yeah, actually, for the first time, like I haven't been in contact on the field here in Lihat with self-harming behavior yet. And also none of the previous team that I knew. So for me, it was actually quite interesting to know like these happening podcast and shit. And then also like for me, I mean, I also studied psychology, so it was nice to have really like a workshop that goes back to theory and gives a like good structured overview of things. So that's what I really like. And yeah, like a lot of things I took from it. Basically, an approach. Like I don't know if before the workshop maybe I would have encountered this, I really probably would have been really overwhelmed and not know what to do. And now I have like some clues of how to handle this. Like okay, I will try to show compassion for the situation, but say no, this is. But I think there are more helpful ways to do this, and I I don't agree. This is a good way to communicate, and so on. Yeah.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, for me, Fabian, I am not a psychologist, but I'm on the field. And anyway, like I've always been interested in psychology. My mom is a psychotherapist. Me myself, I have done some therapy, and I'm always interested in learning notions of psychology. And I think yeah, I finished this workshop with new ideas that will help me here on the field. Um, I found especially interesting. Yeah, well, we already talked about the professional distance and how to be assertive, and how to really like how to address and engage this specific situation of self-harming behavior. But I think the things we went through can also help us in other contexts. Um, and what I found especially interesting is to realize that, for example, to have post-traumatic stress can only be when you are over the trauma. And many people here are still living the traumatic situation, right? So I wonder, like, is it, of course, to give psychological support to POMs right now, it's important, but like maybe it's more important when they actually get to their destiny and they start like their proper life, no, their new life, and then how uh, is the system really built so they can receive the psychological support then, and maybe when it's especially necessary. No? That makes me think. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. I thank you for your feedback, and I really like uh, that you say you feel more comfortable with the situations, and this was what I was going for. We can practice like um, certain techniques, and then, like I said, we don't have the perfect recipe, but it's I'm super happy to hear that you feel more comfortable in going to the field and having ideas on how you act. And whenever you do so, and you might feel that you didn't do it in a satisfying way, you can always reach out to me, and we can talk about this as well. This is something I wanted to tell you as well. Okay. Who wants to go next with the feedback?
Okay. So for me, I'm very satisfied with the workshop because to me it was like just the right middle between like getting theory in a structured way, which is clear. My notes now are very clear and very happy. But also like sharing experiences, which helped me feel first to normalize what we just said, like to see that this is happening recurringly and not only to me, and secondly to learn about others' reaction. I lived the workshop with a bit of how can I say, like, of course, a part of me really wanted the recipe, really wanted to have answers to specific cases. Okay, what should I answer? How should I behave? But now I'm more aware of this expectation, and I'm more also tolerant and understanding that, of course, I do need this, but it's also utopic. So I'm now calm with this feeling, and yeah, and as Leandro say, I also now in this particular moment I'm volunteering in Mozambique, in Africa, with people with mental illness. So I don't know if I will ever work again with POM in my life, but still it's something that I'm that's why I also really wanted to join this workshop today, because I didn't encounter yet such situations, and for sure there are a lot of differences which are culture related, but I hope and I'm sure that I will find something useful as well in another context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good that you say like these expectations of having recipes. It's something. I remember when there was like we had weekly workshops in the hospital where I worked, and most times there were like 10, 15 people coming from like the whole hospital. And then every time it was about self-harming behavior or suicidal behavior, everybody came because everybody wanted to know what to do, because it's things like this that leave us very helpless, that we need support, and in the end it's exactly that we have to find our own way in the individual situation. And from what I hear, from what you shared as experiences, trust your own abilities. You have a lot of compassion. You have a lot of skills already, that you can use and that you already use in difficult situations. So what I want to give you, or to take for you to take home, is to trust in your abilities as well. So thank you for sharing this. Okay, who goes next?
I can continue. First of all, thank you a lot. I also have this a lot with workshops, that I think afterwards I'm super enlightened and I can do everything, which is obviously not, yeah, possible. I don't know. I feel that these situations happened a lot in Patras the time I was there, the 2 months, and I'm still super much in the process of I really want to continue this work, but I also know that I need to think about many things that happened, and I also need to change. So for this reason, to change some behaviors, because it was just getting too close and getting too personal and so on. So it was really, really helpful to share, like especially this feeling of I feel I need to do much more to this person, because I need to compensate something. And also in Patras, I was trying a lot to push away these feelings of at least I'm a bit angry also that I am now part of this so much.
Mm-hmm.
Or so also it's really, really good to talk about that these feelings are super okay to have, and maybe also useful, because for me it was also something super emotional, and I just really didn't know how to handle properly. And then it happened with the whole group a lot, that we just we ended up being involved super much, and didn't really put boundaries. So yeah, for me the sharing part was very useful, and also this positive reinforcement. Yeah, this is very much connected to the whole to my personal topic with this, but yeah, also in this scientific way to understand a bit better. Not only the fact that maybe it's good for your personal mental health to set the boundaries, but also that it's for the whole process, also for the other person.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is, thanks for pointing this out again. It's so nice to hear that sharing is helpful. And so this is also something I would really like for you to take home, that keep on sharing. You don't need to have a workshop for that. You can talk to your friends. You can go to a bar over a beer and share what's keeping your mind busy. And everybody experienced that as helpful. So keep on doing this. And what I also liked, what I got from your feedback is, it's also nice to have like this theoretical framework in order to justify a behavior that might be difficult to keep up, like drawing a line. Of course, it's important to keep your limits as well, but it's also because you don't want to positively reinforce a certain behavior. And really happy that this stuck with you and that you pointed this out again. Thanks for that. So, Marina, you go last.
For me, it was really interesting because I think, like, in the sessions that we've had in the past couple of months, and also like in seminars I've had in my studies, like a lot of these things were in theory clear to me, but it's really nice to have, as you said, repetition is a really good way of learning. So for me, I always appreciate content being repeated. Also, I'm super grateful to have really taken the time to talk about, obviously not all aspects of it, but about a lot more aspects of self-harming behavior than we normally have the time to do, because normally we have like what, an hour in the sessions that we can really talk about a topic like that, and I feel like a lot of times that's just not enough time to really get as much in depth as yeah, maybe would be needed or I would like to. And I'm also super grateful that we were able to record this and that you're going to share the presentation, because this is like such a valuable source of information to be shared with others in the future, where this knowledge can be passed on to people who again encounter situations like this. Honestly. Wow, what is happening? Is somebody getting married or?
I think there's a roadblock somewhere next to my house. I'm sorry. This is beyond my control.
But yeah, thank you for the work that you've put in, and I'm grateful that we're not just keeping it to these 2 days, but that we're going to be able to share it more.
Yeah, I'm super happy that we do this, and I'm happy to share information and knowledge with you guys, and I'm super happy that you shared your experiences and your knowledge from the field. And again, whenever you engage with somebody, not necessarily just with self-harming behavior, when you're not sure about something, always feel free to reach out, and we can try to make an appointment and set up a session and either reassess what happened or maybe plan what can be done next. So based on this, I'm pretty sure that you are all set with your skills, that you can go into the field and do great work. But also, whenever you feel like what you know is not enough or you feel uncertain, feel free to contact me and we can work something out. All right. Yeah, thanks for sharing. I really enjoyed this workshop a lot, and it's a heavy topic, and I really appreciate your input and your discussions and your questions, and of course your interest. And yeah, I hope that things get stuck with you, and whenever you feel like talking about something, feel free to get back to me. I will send the presentation to the group by email, and also we put it on the Google Drive, I think. And apparently we have the whole session as video soon on YouTube as well, which I'm looking forward to.
Okay, thank you so much.
Right.
It was great.
Yes. All right, then enjoy your Saturday and enjoy your weekend, and I hope to see you all again in next workshop, maybe in December, about values and or somewhere else on the field or that our paths cross somewhere else. I would really like that.
What is the next workshop going to be?
It's about when values collide. It's the title, and it's about like to give a brief summary. For example, if you have like you do activism out of certain values, and then you encounter things that are not going according to your values. For example, you want to support people on the move and realize that they are sexist. So this is putting you in a difficult situation, and hopefully this workshop helps to find some ways to cope with situations like that.
Mhm.
All right. Then have a good weekend and see you soon, I hope.
Bye bye.
Thank you a lot.
Okay, thanks for the work.
Thank you so much.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Guys.
The violence in the Balkans, pushbacks every day. The traps of bureaucracy must be the European dream.